How do you respond when people, for example, challenge you on why you're vegetarian?
One response is to say, please read this book.
Peter Singer is widely acknowledged as the father of the animal rights movement, having written a book that awakened millions of people to animal oppression, Animal Liberation, first published in 1975. During the 2 minutes it might take for the introduction of this episode, approximately 316,000 individual sentient beings will have been slaughtered. Is that truly necessary? It's certainly not necessary to feed the world's growing population. As the book argues, if just the United States were to replace beef with another high-protein food, it would have the potential to feed an additional 190 million people. Replacing all animal-based items would free enough land to feed an additional 350 million people. It's sound, logical arguments such as these, and the answers to frequently asked questions such as, what if plants can feel pain too? And other animals eat animals, so why shouldn't we? That leave little doubt in readers' minds. Yet, since Dr. Singer called on readers to boycott meat in the first edition of the book, worldwide meat consumption has increased from 112 million tons to more than 300 million tons. In 2023, an updated version of the book, Animal Liberation Now, the definitive classic renewed, was published, highlighting the progress that the animal movement has made and presenting its major setbacks. Today, it is an honor to be able to sit down with Dr. Singer to talk about this book and his experience in Taiwan.
You recently visited Taiwan. I would like to ask, what was that trip about?
Oh, the trip was in order to launch the traditional Chinese translation of Animal Liberation Now. I'm delighted that thanks to the Life Conservation Association's efforts, that has now been made available for readers in Taiwan.
So, Animal Liberation is one of Time's all-time 100 best nonfiction books, and millions of people have been influenced by its teachings since. Yet, I'm sure you still get asked the same questions all of the time that you first addressed in that first copy. How do you respond when people, for example, challenge you on why you're vegetarian?
Well, one response is to say, please read this book, because in a way I was getting challenged or asked so much about that when I started writing it in the early 1970s. That I thought, well, I'll write a book and then I can just give people a copy of my book if they're seriously interested, or tell them to go and buy it.
Did you really start bringing copies around with you to hand out?
I have to some meetings, yes. After it got into a cheaper paperback anyway, it was a bit, the original hardback was a bit expensive to just give out to everybody who asked that question. But I have, yes. Apart from saying, read the book, I now will say, well, do you know where your meat comes from? Do you know how it's produced? Do you know how the animals live? And I will perhaps try and explain something to them about how those animals live, or maybe there are some films that one can recommend. So you can go to the website of big organizations like People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and they will have videos that were taken by some of their operators who got a job in a factory farm and then just videoed what they were seeing, what was part of their work. They're pretty hard to take, those videos, and some people just don't want to see them. But I think if you are going to eat meat from factory farms or eat eggs or milk from factory farms, it's really something that you ought to be looking at. You can't say, oh, that's so awful, I don't want to see it, and then use your money to actually perpetuate it, because that's what you're doing. If you're buying these products, you're ensuring that it will continue. As long as people buy those products, it seems that those methods of rearing and treating animals are going to continue, and so you really ought to know what you're supporting And to do that, you ought to be looking at those videos, and I'm sure you're not going to enjoy looking at them.
In the book, you write that American standards for animal welfare are abysmal compared to other developed countries. I would like to ask, do you know how Taiwan compares in terms of regulation and public awareness?
I really don't know the answer to that question. I think my sense is that public awareness may be higher than in some parts of the United States. The United States obviously varies. California, for example, people would be much more aware of it and much more opposed to it. And California did pass, as a result of a citizens-initiated referendum, California passed laws that are better than those in most of the rest of the United States. But I think a lot of people in the United States still have little awareness, whereas I think in Taiwan there's probably more, but I can't really say for sure. I haven't talked to enough people. I don't think that there are the best kinds of regulations. I don't think that Taiwan is, for example, at the standard of the European Union, and I think Taiwan could aspire to be at that level. It's a wealthy country that certainly could reach the same level as the European Union.
I think one aspect that has gotten a lot of attention in Taiwan is stray animals. So around 2017, it was outlawed to euthanize healthy animals, cats and dogs, just because there were too many in shelters. And I think the movement towards that happened rather fast as well. But I would say public awareness, after reading some of this, I did try to look up whether or not it's legal in Taiwan to cull male chicks, because I was really curious about that. I just didn't know if that was outlawed in Taiwan or not, and it's not really public information. It's really hard to find. So I would like to also look more into that.
I'm 99% sure that it's not outlawed in Taiwan. I think I would have heard about it if it had been. What we're talking about, in case your listeners don't realise it, is we're talking about chicks of the egg-laying breed of chicken, because the chickens who are raised for meat are a completely different breed. So obviously male chicks of the egg-laying breed aren't going to lay eggs, and they're not commercially useful in terms of rearing for meat. So they routinely get killed when they're shortly after they're born, in their first day or two of life. Their sex, the males and females, are separated, and the males are killed. Sometimes they're just thrown into a machine that crushes them. Sometimes they may be into a bag that is filled with a gas that will kill them. There is a technique that has been developed and is in use in some parts of Europe for selecting during the egg stage. You can detect which are the males and which are the females, and then you can get rid of them when they're still in the egg and before they are capable of feeling pain. So that's a much better way of dealing with this issue. But I don't think it's in operation in Taiwan, at least not yet.
Yes, I could see that being something that listeners would be very invested in changing in Taiwan, which is why I'm glad that you do have a Mandarin version of the book for people to read and reference now. One of the arguments in this book, sort of the central argument, is just based around this idea that we should inflict as little pain as possible. And you write that the core argument you're putting forward in the first publication seemed so irrefutable that you thought everyone who read it would surely be convinced by it and would tell their friends to read it. Looking back, do you feel like that's what actually happened?
It certainly didn't happen to the extent that I would have liked it to happen. You could say the extent that I dreamed it would happen. Maybe I was not really realistic in terms of how wedded people are to their particular food habits, and they include eating meat, and also that they want to pay as little as possible for their food, which is, of course, for some people is a necessity. Mm-hmm. But even for others who could afford more, they're reluctant to pay more on the basis of trying to get meat from animals who are able to go outside, not confined indoors in sheds as so many of the animals who are killed for food are. Obviously, many people did read it. Many people have been influenced by it, including some of the leaders of the animal movement. worldwide in the United States and elsewhere. But I was disappointed or disillusioned, I suppose, that as I said, I thought the arguments were so irrefutable that it could trigger a rapid worldwide movement, at least in affluent countries where people have lots of choices. You can walk into a supermarket and either choose to buy animal products or not. I'd hope that it would trigger a mass move away from at least buying factory farmed animal products. But though some people did make that change, it wasn't nearly big enough to end the suffering that goes on such a vast scale in the factory farms that exist today.
I find that interesting because from anybody else's perspective, they would say that all of these books have been a major success and they have influenced millions of people. But from your perspective, it's still just not enough. Really,
no, unfortunately, it really needs to influence hundreds of millions of people or even billions of people to stop factory farming. I would like to see factory farming ended completely, but that certainly hasn't happened.
Was this your first visit to Taiwan?
No, it was actually my fourth visit to Taiwan. I'm fortunate to have been there on several occasions over quite a few years. Mainly that's due to the life conservation associations, because I was invited by the Venerable Chow Wei many years ago to a conference, to speak at a conference they had about animals and ethics. And then I was invited back a few years later, and then Chow Wei and I decided to have a dialogue about the different ethical views we hold, because I'm a secular utilitarian ethicist, and Chow Wei is, of course, a Buddhist ethicist, and our views overlap in many important areas, including the treatment of animals, but they also differ in some respects. So we had a dialogue about that was recorded and translated and eventually published as a book called The Buddhist and the Ethicist.
Does anything stand out to you as being memorable or notable from your multiple trips to Taiwan?
Oh, there are many things that are notable. Certainly, I think one would have to say the food is always notable in Taiwan. It's really delicious. And of course, when I was being hosted by people from the Life Conservation Association and by Buddhists, often they know how to get delicious vegetarian food as well. So that's a particular extra bonus. But beyond that, I would like to say that I think the people are wonderful, at least the people that I've met who've been, some of them have been academics, some of them have been people involved in animal welfare organizations, some of them have been Buddhists. They've been so hospitable and welcoming. It's really a delight to be there. And I should also mention that you have spectacular scenery and mountains. And on this visit, my wife came with me and we were able to do some hiking as well. Which we really enjoyed too. Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, I had noted down that Taiwan has the world's actually third largest rate of vegetarianism, with about 13% of the population being vegetarian, largely due to religious reasons. There are also many foods you can get here, plant-based, that you won't be able to get outside of Taiwan. Did anything stick out to you of local food-wise that you tried and you really...
The first thing that stuck out was that there were so many different dishes, right? Such an incredible variety of vegetarian dishes, several of which I'd never had before. One example that did stick out was cognac, which I hadn't had before, and it's a great thing to eat. I like the texture of it. It's kind of a little bit bouncy and chewy, and it takes various flavors and sauces very well. So that's good. There are also so many different kinds of tofu too. That I like tofu, and again, it takes particular flavorings and sauces very well, ranging from quite soft tofu to very firm tofu and many different forms. It was also enjoyable. And then there were just such a lot of different vegetables too, great variety of vegetables.
Also, compared to where I'm from in the US, definitely Taiwan has the upper edge on tofu products and vegetables.
But as I say, it's a beautiful place apart from that. The dialogue that I had with Venerable Chow Wei was at a vihara in the mountains with spectacular views. It was a beautiful place to talk and be peaceful. It's a meditation center for Buddhists there. So it was, there was this lovely sense of peace and tranquility, as well as the great scenery and good food there too.
I'm glad it sounds like you were well taken care of then.
Absolutely, very well taken care of. Yeah. Well, let me just say, as you said at the beginning, that Taiwan has got maybe the third highest percentage of vegetarians. I assume India is at the top of that list. I'm not sure what's second.
Israel?
Could be Israel, actually, yeah. Because if you're a religious Jew, you separate meat and milk products. And so one way of making that simpler is just not to have meat products. Anyway, if Taiwan is third, that's impressive, but it also means it will be easier for people listening to this to become vegetarian or vegan. So if there's one thing that I want to say to them, it's give it a try. Try doing without meat, particularly try doing without factory farm products, but why not just do without meat altogether, and see how you like it. And maybe you'll want to go further even and go completely vegan. Maybe you'll want to stick with being vegetarian. Maybe you'll want to sometimes have some meat, but you'll look for non-factory farm sources of it. All of those things would be steps in the right direction. You'd be on the right side of, or anyway, on a better side of the ethical line than you are if you're just going into a supermarket and buying all kinds of animal products without asking where they come from.
During my time as a vegetarian, the arguments I got presented with most were maybe plants can feel too, but animals kill other animals eat other animals. So I really appreciated reading strong points against these arguments in your book, because these sort of tripped me up for a long time. I wasn't sure how exactly to address it. But there's a new question I have after reading it, which is, how should I weigh the morality or the ethicality of buying pet food made with animal products for my cats or dogs?
Yeah, so firstly, I think this is only a question that you need to ask yourself if you're not eating animal products yourself. So if you're not buying meat, if you're vegetarian or even vegan, you might want to ask yourself that question. But of course, for the majority of people who are eating meat themselves, and we certainly don't need to eat meat, we're omnivores, and we can be perfectly healthy without eating meat. I've been a vegetarian for 54 years myself, and of course there are other people who've been vegetarian or vegan for generations. So we don't need to eat it. So the first thing to do would be to cut it out of your own diet. Cats and dogs, well, dogs certainly can do quite well on a vegetarian diet. They can be pretty omnivorous, and that's okay. So I think you may choose to make your dog vegetarian, but it's very difficult with cats. Cats are really carnivores. And so I think if you're going to have a cat, then you probably do need to feed your cat on some kind of meat or fish. But I think it's more reasonable to say, well, my cat is a carnivore. If I'm going to have a cat, I've got to feed the cat something that the cat will like and do well on. And I think we should look at our own eating habits, really, before we worry too much about questions of what we're feeding our cats or our dogs.
Tune back in to Radio Taiwan International and listen to Formosa Fauna next week to hear more from our esteemed guest, Dr. Peter Singer. Making it to the end of an episode makes you a Formosa Fauna friend. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next Friday for Formosa Fauna Fridays.